Hello friends, welcome to YouTube channel Parliamentary Reporter. This is English shorthand dictation exercise number 31. The dictation speed is 140 words per minute. Ready? Start. The sale of liquor has been prohibited by the central government in exercise of powers under the Disaster Management Act 2005. The ban raises the question of the expense of this enactment. How much inflation of ambit would be constitutionally permissible, given that our constitution is federal in character and involves an elaborate distribution of powers in the 7th schedule, as also the fact that except for the exercise of powers under Article 356, the state governments cannot be superseded. The objective of the Disaster Management Act 2005 is to deal with disasters, their impact, and all steps necessary to alleviate, remedy, and rehabilitate. The object limits the ambit of the Act. It does not matter how wide the phraseology of the provisions is. The object or purpose of the Act sets the limit. In an important court case judgment in 2016, the Supreme Court had observed that purposive construction is today's golden rule of interpretation. If that is so, can the central government prohibit the sale of liquor even though the sale of essential and non-essential goods has been permitted? Let us look at the three lists in the 7th schedule of the Constitution. Entry 8 in the state list, read with Article 246, gives exclusive powers to the states to legislate and execute with respect to the manufacture, production, distribution, and sale of liquor. The central government has no power in this respect. It cannot encroach upon the legislative domain of the states. However, how does the Disaster Management Act empower the center to impose a temporary ban on the sale of liquor during the fight with coronavirus pandemic? The Centre can rest its case on Entry 29 of the Concurrent List, which enables it to deal with the epidemic. It may bring in the residuary Entry 97 in the Central List to deal with the disasters. The residuary entry operates only when there are no express entries in any list. Neither of these entries would displace Entry 8 of the State List. If necessary, the Centre can prohibit all sales or some sales to deal with the pandemic disaster. But if retail and wholesale sales of essential articles as well as non-essential articles and food deliveries are allowed, can the retailers be prevented from supplying liquor? It is difficult to comprehend how the home delivery of liquor, particularly foreign liquor or IMFL, would result in the spread of coronavirus. It is a non-essential commodity which can be supplied to homes on demand after wearing masks and gloves. Notably, the supply of liquor presents a vital source of revenue along with sales tax. The states need funds to remain functional and to discharge their duties, even those with respect to COVID-19. Managing a pandemic disaster brings in elements of centralization in an otherwise federal framework of our constitutional governance, but only to enable the central government to deal with the pandemic. The Disaster Management Act 2005 cannot totally disrupt the state's plenary jurisdiction as a federal partner. In fact, this enactment in itself carrying a federal structure for dealing with the pandemic. However, if the goods to be supplied are selected for prohibition irrespective of linkage to pandemic management or proximate nexus with it, or the classification and selection of goods for continued prohibition is palpably arbitrary, then it becomes unconstitutional. The prohibition of liquor supply is in exercise of an executive power under the Disaster Management Act. The executive needs to satisfy the rationality and proportionality test. In this case, where the supplier is willing to comply with the precautionary norms and is in a position to do so, the continued ban on supply of liquor in any form is clearly and manifestly arbitrary. there is no justification for treating it differently from other non-essentials. There seems to be an oversight that this good is in the exclusive jurisdiction of the states and its sale is much needed for the revenue of a state. It adversely impacts the state's economy as well as the fight against the pandemic. It is said that there is domestic violence on account of the consumption of liquor. If allowed in the present times, it would increase violence. But this is a matter for the states to consider for imposing a permanent ban. It is not a disaster management issue. It is said that the poor would divert his little income, to liquor. For this reason, the whole society should be deprived, else there would be a charge of discrimination. This too is for the states to consider while devising excise policy and rules. It may temporarily withhold supply of liquor, country liquor, or raise its prices. Assuming that there is power micromanaging selection of products by the central government is not a good idea. The states execute at the ground level and the situation of coronavirus spread in each state is different. Even within the states, there are areas where there is little or no impact or the situation is getting better. Hence, at the micro level, the states should be left alone to decide for themselves. It may be noted that the financial condition of the states is grim. The excise duty source needs to be revived. This will also help the center as the demand from the states for funds will reduce. Federal cooperation and federal freedom are essential for the economic revival of India. Earlier this month, the United Nations Secretariat held a meeting of a group of countries on regional efforts to support peace in Afghanistan. Countries included in this group were China, Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, the United States, Russia, and Afghanistan itself. India was conspicuous by its absence from the meeting on April 16, given its historical and strategic ties with Afghanistan. But this was not the first time it had happened. In December 2001, the Indian team arrived in Germany, where the famous Bonn Agreement was negotiated. The Indian team found that no reservations had been made for them at the official venue. In January 2010, India was invited to attend the London Conference on Afghanistan, but left out of the room during a crucial meeting that decided on opening talks with the Taliban. In 2020, the reason given for keeping India out of regional discussions on Afghanistan was ostensibly that it holds no boundary with Afghanistan, but in fact it is because New Delhi has never announced its support for the US Taliban peace process. However, in both 2001 and 2010, India fought back its exclusion successfully. At the Bonn Agreement, the Indian ambassador was widely credited for ensuring that Northern Alliance leaders came to a consensus to accept Hamid Karzai as the chairman of the interim arrangement that replaced the Taliban regime. After the 2010 conference, New Delhi redoubled its efforts with Kabul. In 2011, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Afghanistan President Karzai signed the historic Strategic Partnership Agreement, which was Afghanistan's first such agreement with any country. As planners in South Bloc now consider their next steps in Afghanistan, they must fight back against the idea that any lasting solution in Afghanistan can be discussed without India in the room, while also studying the reasons for such exclusions. To begin with, India's resistance to publicly talking to the Taliban has made it an awkward interlocutor at any table. Its position that only an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled process can be allowed is a principled one but has no takers. Kabul does not own or control the reconciliation process today, comprising the US Taliban negotiation for American troops withdrawal and intra-Afghan talks on power sharing. The US Taliban peace deal means that the Taliban, which has not let up on violent attacks on the Afghan army, will become more potent as the US withdraws soldiers from the country. It will hold more sway in the inter-Afghan process also, as the US withdraws funding for the government in Kabul. New Delhi's decision to put all its eggs in the Kabul basket has had a twofold effect. Firstly, its voice in the reconciliation process has been limited, and secondly, it has weakened India's position with other leaders of the deeply divided democratic setup in Kabul. Meanwhile, India's presence inside Afghanistan, which has been painstakingly built up since 2001, is being threatened afresh by terror groups such as the ISKP, believed to be backed by Pakistan. Intercepts showed that the brutal attack in March that killed 25 people at a Gurudwara in Kabul was meant for the embassy in Kabul, and intelligence agencies had warned of suicide car bomb threats to the consulates last December.